Before he became America's most unforgettable banker on television, Raymond Bailey's journey began far from the bright lights and cameras. Long before the world knew him as the greedy but charming Mr. Drysdale from the Beverly Hillbillies, Raymond was just a boy with a dream, born not into fame, but into a life marked by modesty, distance, and determination. Before we dive into video, please subscribe our channel. Raymond Thomas Bailey was born on May 6, 1904, in San Francisco, California. His early years were spent in a world that was still healing from the devastating 1906 earthquake, and life in the city was anything but easy. His father worked a regular job, and the family lived a humble life, far from luxury. Young Raymond, quiet and thoughtful, often found his joy in watching silent films at the local theater, where he became mesmerized by the performances. He did not know it then, but those moments would plant a seed deep in his heart, one that would slowly grow into a powerful desire to become an actor. Raymond was not a child who followed the usual path. He was not interested in business or law, as many expected from boys of that time. Instead, he was fascinated by storytelling, characters, and the magic of performance. But becoming an actor in the early 1900s was not just rare. It was nearly unthinkable for someone without money or connections. His dream was seen as unrealistic by many around him. Still, Raymond did not let go. After finishing high school, he took various jobs, including working on a plantation in Hawaii and later becoming a merchant seaman. These were not glamorous roles, but they taught him discipline, gave him life experience, and most importantly, they gave him stories. Through these early wanderings, Raymond carried one constant thought: he would one day find his way onto the screen. But dreams are not always welcomed by life's harsh realities. Little did Raymond know his journey to stardom would take years, full of rejection, silence, and heartbreak. He would have to leave everything behind more than once just to survive, and that's where the real struggle begins. After drifting from job to job in his youth, Raymond Bailey made a bold decision that would define the rest of his life. He set his eyes on Hollywood. With no formal training, no contacts, and barely enough money in his pocket, he moved to Los Angeles, hoping to land roles in the movie industry. But the Hollywood of the 1930s was ruthless. It was not a place for dreamers without a name. Casting calls were overcrowded, and competition was cutthroat. Rejected at every turn, Raymond faced the harsh truth. Being passionate was not enough. Unable to secure acting work, Raymond did what he had to in order to survive. He worked as a day laborer, took small jobs on film sets, sometimes just moving equipment, and even returned to working at sea as a merchant mariner when times got too tough. He was not defeated, but reality was beginning to weigh on him. Eventually, the disappointment became too much. Raymond left Los Angeles and went to New York, hoping that maybe Broadway or radio would be more welcoming. But success did not come there either. With doors closed in both cities, he spent a few years traveling across the country, doing odd jobs to make ends meet. It was a dark and uncertain period. He was a man with talent and dreams, but no stage to prove it. But Raymond Bailey was not the type to give up easily. With perseverance etched into his soul, he returned to Los Angeles once again in the early 1940s. This time, he was a little older, a little wiser, and a lot more determined. He started landing small roles, often uncredited. Bit by bit, his face became more familiar in the background of films. It was not fame, but it was progress. His break finally came when producers began noticing his natural presence on screen. His calm demeanor, sharp expressions, and unique voice began to stand out. He was often cast in roles of authority: doctors, businessmen, or stern officials. Slowly, Raymond Bailey began carving a place for himself in Hollywood, not with explosions or headlines, but with consistency, professionalism, and quiet brilliance. Little did he know, a role was waiting for him that would turn everything around. That role was Mr. Drysdale, and it would change his life forever. By the late 1950s, Raymond Bailey had become a recognizable face in supporting roles. But stardom still hadn't truly arrived. That all changed in 1962, when he was cast as Milburn, Drysdale, the greedy yet oddly endearing banker, in the new CBS sitcom, The Beverly Hillbillies. At first, Bailey did not know what to expect. The show's premise, a poor backwoods family suddenly becoming millionaires and moving to Beverly Hills, seemed ridiculous to many in the industry. But as soon as it aired, the response was explosive. Audiences fell in love with the Clampetts, and with the characters surrounding them, including Mr. Drysdale, Raymond's portrayal of the obsessive banker, who would do anything to keep the Clampett's fortune in his bank was pitch perfect. He brought charm, timing, and a touch of madness to the role. Despite being selfish and money-hungry, Mr. Drysdale became a fan favorite because of Bailey's clever balance of comedy and humanity. The success of the Beverly Hillbillies was unlike anything Raymond had ever experienced. The show became one of the highest-rated television series of the 1960s. Suddenly, Bailey was not just working, he was a star. From being background characters to leading primetime television, it was a transformation years in the making. But fame came with a price. The show's popularity typecast him as Mr. Drysdale. For many fans, Raymond Bailey and Milburn Drysdale were one and the same. And while he embraced the role that brought him recognition, it would shadow him for the rest of his life. Still, for a man who had once wandered across the country chasing work, this moment was everything. He had finally arrived. But behind the laughter, a quieter, more painful reality was waiting. Inside the home he called his own. Despite his fame as Mr. Drysdale, Raymond Bailey was never the flashy celebrity type. While many stars of the 1960s were buying mansions in the Hollywood Hills or Malibu, Raymond lived a quieter, more secluded life. His home was modest, a small Spanish-style house tucked away in a quiet Los Angeles neighborhood. It was not a grand estate, but it was peaceful, shaded by old trees, with ivy crawling across its front walls and an iron gate that kept the world out. He had no children of his own, and the house reflected that. Rooms were sparsely decorated, filled more with books and scripts than with lavish furniture. A small study at the back of the house was where he spent most of his time, reading, writing, and reflecting. Unlike his on-screen persona, obsessed with wealth, Raymond lived simply. Friends described the house as quiet and still, almost frozen in time. After the Beverly Hillbillies ended in 1971, Bailey slowly withdrew from the public eye. He made fewer appearances, and his health began to decline. By the late 1970s, he had left Hollywood almost entirely. The house, once his haven, became increasingly isolated. Neighbors recalled that over time, the property grew unkempt. The garden went wild, paint chipped, curtains stayed drawn. Eventually, Raymond moved out due to his illness. The house was left behind, abandoned, neglected, and nearly forgotten. Years later, urban explorers and fans stumbled upon the property. Dust-covered furniture, old photographs, and vintage memorabilia still sat inside. It was as if Raymond had simply walked away and never returned. This silent home, once full of lines rehearsed and dreams realized, stood as a haunting reminder of a star who quietly faded. But who did he leave behind? What about love, marriage, and family? That's where we go next. Behind Raymond Bailey's calm, professional demeanor was a man who kept his personal life deeply private. Unlike many of his peers in Hollywood, he rarely gave interviews about his relationships or personal affairs. This led to much speculation. But in truth, Raymond was a deeply solitary soul. He married once, and only once. His wife, Gabby Ada George, was not a Hollywood actress or socialite, but a quiet, elegant woman who stayed far from the limelight. The two met in the early 1950s, long before Bailey reached widespread fame. Their relationship was built on mutual respect and understanding, not glamour. She supported him through the highs and lows of his unpredictable career. Those close to the couple described their marriage as stable but reserved. They did not host lavish parties or attend industry events. Instead, they spent quiet evenings, at home, often reading or listening to music. Gabby was known to be fiercely loyal, and she remained by Bailey's side during his most difficult years. The couple never had children. Some speculated it was by choice, others believed it was due to medical reasons. Regardless, Raymond seemed content in the quiet rhythm of married life. But as the years passed and his health declined, Raymond became more reclusive. Gabby, too, stepped further into the background, taking care of him away from public view. When Bailey fell seriously ill in the late 1970s, Gabby was his sole caregiver, shielding him from the noise of the world. He passed away in 1980 at the age of 75, leaving behind a widow who had loved him quietly and completely. After his death, Gabby disappeared entirely from the public eye. But what did Raymond leave behind in terms of wealth, property, and legacy? Let's take a closer look at what remained: his net worth and final belongings. At the height of his fame on the Beverly Hillbillies, Raymond Bailey was earning a respectable income. Though exact salary figures were rarely publicized in those days, It's estimated that he earned around $2,500 per episode during the show's peak, equivalent to over $20,000 per episode in today's value. Over the course of 9 seasons and more than 200 episodes, his earnings added up to a modest fortune, especially for a character actor of his time. However, unlike modern celebrities who invest in business ventures, real estate, or endorsements, Raymond lived quietly and spent cautiously. He never flaunted his earnings. There were no flashy cars or penthouse purchases. He lived in the same modest home for decades and avoided the lavish lifestyle associated with Hollywood. Most of his wealth was held in savings, pensions, and personal assets. At the time of his death in 1980, Raymond Bailey's net worth was estimated to be between $500,000 to $1 million, a comfortable sum, but not the kind of empire that headlines are made of. Some of his assets included vintage furniture, rare books, acting memorabilia, and a modest stock portfolio. His home, though deteriorating, was still valuable due to its location. There are no public records of a will or large inheritance. Since he had no children, and his wife Gabby kept a very low profile after his death, it is believed she inherited most, if not all, of his estate. After she passed away, reportedly a few years later, what remained was quietly absorbed by distant relatives or state probate systems. Raymond did not leave behind a fortune to be fought over, but what he did leave was far more valuable: a legacy of honest work, professionalism, and quiet dedication. But even the most disciplined lives have their storms. His was not without setbacks and shadows. While Raymond Bailey's career may have seemed smooth on the surface, it was not without hardship. Behind the scenes, he battled personal and professional struggles that remained largely hidden from the public eye. Perhaps the most heartbreaking of these was his slow but devastating decline in health. In the early 1970s, just as the Beverly Hillbillies was winding down, Raymond began showing signs of Alzheimer's disease, a condition not widely understood at the time. Friends and co-workers noticed that he was forgetting lines more often, losing focus on set, and sometimes appearing confused. While producers made efforts to accommodate him, the disease's progression made it clear that Raymond could no longer maintain a steady acting career. He retired quietly, without a farewell tour or public announcement. Hollywood moved on without much notice. For a man who had spent decades chasing recognition, this quiet exit must have been deeply painful. Unlike many of his contemporaries, Raymond Bailey was never involved in scandal. There were no tabloid headlines, no legal battles, no feuds with co-stars. But this very absence of noise perhaps worked against him in later years, as the industry and public began to forget him. As his illness worsened, Raymond withdrew from public life entirely. Those who visited him during his final years described a man far removed from the character he had once portrayed, confused, quiet, and deeply weary. His wife, Gabby, remained his only steady companion, shielding him from outside eyes. His final years were marked not by glory, but by silence. Hollywood, so quick to cheer a rising star, was just as quick to let an ailing one fade away. Yet even after the lights dimmed, Raymond's impact endured. In his final chapter, there was still something powerful, something eternal. Though Raymond Bailey never staged a comeback in the traditional sense, no late career film roles, no autobiography, no award show appearances, his legacy has quietly endured through the decades. It was not through fanfare or fame that Raymond stayed alive in the public consciousness. It was through one unforgettable character, Mr. Drysdale. The Beverly Hillbillies continues to air in reruns around the world, introducing new generations to Bailey's sharp comedic timing and unforgettable expressions. Streaming platforms and classic TV networks have kept his work accessible, and his role as the greedy banker remains a cultural icon. Memes, GIFs, and tribute videos frequently feature his scenes, especially his over-the-top attempts to keep the Clampett fortune at his bank. In a way, Raymond Bailey achieved what many stars never do: timelessness. While others relied on headlines or scandal to stay relevant, Bailey's work spoke for itself. His professionalism, humility, and dedication to his craft left a quiet but lasting impression on everyone who worked with him and everyone who watched him. In recent years, interest in the private lives of old Hollywood stars has grown. Fans have tried to trace the whereabouts of his abandoned home, shared theories about his hidden life, and paid tribute to him on forums and fan pages. Documentaries and blogs continue to explore his career, piecing together a life that was lived mostly out of the spotlight. Raymond Bailey may not have left behind a golden statue or a billion-dollar empire, But he left behind something far more meaningful. A body of work built on subtlety, commitment, and grace. In the end, his story is not about being the biggest star, but about being true to the craft and leaving quietly, with dignity. And maybe that's the most powerful legacy of all.